Hello everyone and welcome to the Ultrasound podcast with me, Tom Evans, professional trail runner and winner of Western States in 2023.
I'm Brett Saunders, I'm Chief Crew Officer and best man at his wedding.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Ultrasound podcast. I am Tom, one of your hosts, and I'm accompanied with
Brett Saunders,
who is going to be co-hosting this podcast. And yeah, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Yeah, looking forward to getting this out. It's been a long time coming, and it's going to be fun.
So why are we here, Tom?
So I guess, a couple of months ago, I thought that it would be cool to have a podcast with myself, a professional trail runner, and you, my best mate, and a very, very amateur ultra runner, and talk about life, training, and absolutely everywhere in between. Some nuggets of gold in there, as well as a bit of banter and a bit of fun. So I guess those who are listening probably know a little bit about me, but probably don't know anything about you. And if they did, I'd be a little bit worried. So, Bretty.
Yes.
Tell me and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
As you said, I'm a very amateur runner, but also here very much as a member of your crew, your best man, and seeing the highs and lows that you've gone through on your career and stories that I'm sure I can share, which you might not be willing to.
And it's a big year.
And it is a very big year for you, obviously, coming up to UTMB at the end of the year. Yeah,
big year. Very, very exciting. And I guess I'm incredibly lucky to have you as part of my team, having like that different outlook onto things. Like for me, I can get very caught up in the intricacies of being a professional runner, and sometimes you just gotta take a little step back and you'll see things in a completely different way to me, which I think is really nice. And like you said, like we met at school. And how old do you reckon we were when we started playing? Before we knew each other, when do you think when do you think our eyes first met?
I reckon it would have been somewhere along the, probably about 10, 12. No,
earlier than that.
Do you reckon it was?
I reckon it was when we were sort of 7, 8 years old.
Fine, yes, it would have been. Well, ashed out. Yeah, I guess it would have been that.
Playing
rugby, football, cricket and hockey against each other.
Yeah.
Later going on to play them all together, apart from football.
So, I guess, from playing against each other to playing with each other.
Yes.
Is quite nice. And I think both back at school, like we probably never went running together. Like I don't think anything like that happened. And I guess after school, kind of as everyone does, like we probably lost touch a little bit. And the world of social media, and at this point Facebook, you feel like you know what everyone's doing just without chatting to them. And I guess like things sort of did a 360 and came back together like when I started running properly, probably at a similar point to when you started running as well. Yes, for different reasons, but like it's the same thing.
100%.
Running's running. So I think it's been a really fun like 360 degree circle, and like I've crewed you at races, you've crewed me at races, and I think it's really nice to have like that different blend in it. Growing up, like you were one of the best athletes, general sports people that I knew.
I mean, that's very kind of you to say, but I played a lot of sport when I was younger. As soon as I left school, I pretty much, my sporting career fell off the face of the earth sort of thing. I didn't really do anything. I think that was mainly down to playing so much sport at school from, like you said, when we first met, probably like 7 years old playing sport then, the whole way through to 18, we were playing sport constantly.
You weren't there. That's all you really did at school.
Yeah, literally. I mean, I wasn't there to pass exams as such.
What did you get in your exams when we left school?
I can't exactly remember what that was, but I'll bring that to the next episode maybe.
But you didn't go to university.
I didn't go to university.
Arguably not out of choice.
No, it was out of choice. I decided to go to Australia farming instead, but we'll leave that for another time. What about you, Tom? What did you get?
I think I got 2 A's and a B.
Really?
But, yeah.
In what?
Well, I had to retake everything.
Okay.
And it was enough. It was enough to join the army. I then went to Sandhurst. So I just want to jump in and say a massive thank you for Garmin for sponsoring. I've been using Garmin now for over 6 years, and it was actually my first watch that I bought when I was in the army. Now, as a professional athlete, I use Garmin 24/7 to measure not just my training, but my HRV and also tracking my sleep. For me, I find the most valuable things about my Garmin is using the features such as Pace Pro and Climb Pro for when I'm racing. This really helps me to gauge the effort, especially going uphill, to make sure that I don't go too hard too soon and I'm able to finish the race off in style. Finally, and I think the most important thing, is the battery life. Having a watch that can last longer than you can out on the trails is an absolute game changer, and looking forward to using Garmin for the rest of the season.
Okay, so obviously you just mentioned you went to Sandhurst. Firstly, how did that come about? What was your thought process going to the army? And yeah, talk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think for me, I was a bit bored and fed up with the traditional educational route, and I knew that going to university wasn't really for me, because I knew that I didn't want to do a standard Monday to Friday 9 till 5. Like, I remember at school having like the job fairs and people coming in, of accountants and things, and like, I've got nothing against that. Like, that wasn't what I was into. That definitely wasn't my skill set. And the army was super appealing. I was sold on the get to travel the world, play loads of sport, and actually, like, I look back at my army career now incredibly fondly, having got to have done all of that, and I think has definitely shaped who I am as an athlete, but more importantly as a person. I think the lessons that I learned in the 8 years that I was in the army have shaped me more than any of my other years, whether that was at school, studying for exams, on the sports pitch. I think this like really linked everything together and sort of knitted everything together. And when I was in the army, sort of still played team sports, but was at the point in my career that it was a bit unprofessional rocking up to work on a Monday morning with a black eye from playing rugby. And I got into endurance, and I wanted to find the hardest challenges that I could do to, I think, just to test myself mentally and physically. So
I couldn't agree. I think, like you said, I think from a friend seeing that as well, like there's a lot of structure that came from the army and has shaped like the person that you are today. And I think that is, all credit to the army for that. Do you think there was a huge amount of, when you were in the army, obviously I know you mentioned you wanted to push those limits and test, was there anything in the army that pushed you to the ultra running, or was that something from inside that you wanted to test? Or
I think it was just finding the hardest thing that I could do, signing up to it, and then trying to figure out how to do it. Like, being naive enough to sign up and then stubborn enough to see it out. Like, the first triathlon I signed up to was Ironman Wales. I had a road bike. I did one long training ride. I did a sportif in Sussex. It was 100 miles. Gave myself Achilles tendonitis. I did a couple of runs. I did one open water swim, and I am not the best swimmer, but ended up finishing 4th in my age group, missing out on a space of the age group world championships by 1 place. And out of everyone, including the pros, I had the 3rd fastest run of the day. And so I guess at that point I was like, why am I bothering doing the swimming and the cycling? Like, I didn't enjoy it. I didn't even have a bike computer, so I didn't know how far I had gone. I could not imagine doing anything like that now.
Was there any specific training that went into that? Or was that
Absolutely not.
Really?
It was just, I was just so naive going into it. I was like, loads of people can do it. I'm sure it's hard, but I'm sure I can do it. And then, I then had once that had done, I sort of then decided, oh, maybe I'll start. Like, I enjoyed the running more. I think it's very difficult when people are going past you, but things become much easier when you're going past them. And on the bike and the swim, it was as if I was standing still and just being overtaken. And then on the run, it was the other way around. So yeah, I then signed up to Marathon des Sables. That I had some friends in the army who did it in 2016. They did really well. They finished in the top 300. And again, I knew little about Marathon des Sables. I'd watched the James Cracknell documentary where he finished top Brit, and I think he was 7th or 8th, but definitely in the top 10.
Yeah.
And again, I thought, wow, this looks really hard. This looks super challenging. Why not? Like, why can't I give this a go? And as all good ideas start in the pub, ended up betting my mates that I could finish higher up than they did. And fast forward the clock 12 months, first non-sub-Saharan African man to finish on the podium.
Yeah, absolutely.
With no coach, with no specific training. Yes, I'm into sports science. I spent some time in the heat lab beforehand.
Yeah.
But it was all self-taught. And I learned so much doing that still to this day is like massively shaped the way that I do or do not do things. Like, I learned so much in that. And for me, that was being able to make mistakes at that early stage, I think was really important. Whereas I think a lot of people in professional sport come into it through a history of sport.
Yeah.
Whereas I was coming at it from a completely different angle. So I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I was prepared to not know and to make those mistakes and to be like, actually, screw it. Let's just give it a go. If it works, brilliant. If it doesn't, okay, well, why didn't it work?
Yeah.
And then build from it. And that's definitely like a mentality that I've taken forward, not just in my running, but like with my coaching.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, like, why are things going right or why are things going wrong? And then just figure out, okay, well, let's piece this all together and let's figure it out.
Would you say after you did the MDS, you had that, you had the success there. Would you say that was the transition that in your head, as well as people probably approaching you being like, this is something that you can do, this is something that we can push forward to, like to actually make a career out of? Is that the time and the moment?
I think, if I'm being completely honest, like, I didn't realize it was a thing. Like, there were some people saying, oh, maybe you could do this, but like, I didn't know that I could do this professionally. Like, I guess what Marathon des Sables did is it gave me a little bit of a name, that I was then invited to a couple more races. Like, Marathon des Sables it's so specific.
Yeah.
Like a 5-day multi-stage race in the desert. Like, the Moroccan athletes who have typically done really well there haven't ever really broken into normal racing in Europe, single stage racing in Europe. So I felt like I needed to prove myself that I wasn't like this one trick pony, very good at multi-stage races in the desert, because that's pretty niche. Huge thank you for Morton for sponsoring. I started testing with Morton in 2017 and was one of the first athletes in the UK to use it, and I've been using it every season since. I use the whole range of products, including the Drink Mix 320, the Gel 160, and more recently, sodium bicarbonate. The Hydrogel allows me to hit high carbohydrate goals with no stomach issues to make me feel my best on race day. Go and give Morton a go and fuel yourself for your next race.
Okay, so for people who don't know what MDS is, and multi-stage racing, can you give a bit of a background on that and what it exactly entails?
Yeah, for sure. So, Marathon des Sables is mental.
Okay.
It is, and there is nothing quite like it. Yes, there are other multi-stage races, but this one is just unique in every way that it does. I think the first unique thing is the race director chooses the time zone. Like, you're not in a normal time zone. He just decides this is Marathon des Sables time.
Okay.
Which is wild, and you don't know what that's going to be until you arrive. So that's the mentality that you've got to get into for the start of the race. And for some people who are used to like super professional, this is how it's going to be run, that's already a huge hurdle, because I guess it unsettles everyone. Whereas for me, I was just like, well, okay, let's just roll with it.
When you say time zone that's different, they they don't start it at, say, 9 o'clock their time. They start it whenever. What do you mean?
No,
by
they
that?
started at 9 o'clock their time, but that's not the time zone that they choose.
Yeah.
Isn't the Moroccan time zone.
Really?
He just decides. Okay, now it's 9
So
o'clock.
that could be mid of the night,
Yeah.
Moroccan time, but that is 9 o'clock for the start of the race.
But thankfully, it's not that far
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
but
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's the mentality that you've got to get into. So, Marathon des Sables itself is a 5-stage over 6 days, self-supported foot race across part of the Sahara Desert. So, average distance for 4 of those stages is a marathon.
Yeah.
And then for one of the stages, the long stage, typically it's a double marathon.
Okay.
On my double marathon day, that was the furthest that I had ever run in one go.
Okay.
And that was after 3 marathons.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of people listening to this they're probably either run a marathon, they're aiming to run a marathon, they run a half marathon, and they're working on their time. And they're running on the road or the trails. You're running on sand in a desert. What sort of splits are you running? What sort of times are you doing? What sort of marathon times are you running? Double marathon?
Mate, I bought a Casio watch at the airport. I didn't have GPS. I didn't know how far I was running, how fast. I have 0 data.
Oh, really?
This was how naive I was going into the race.
Yeah.
And like you see some people doing it now. Emil Kerris has just raced London incredibly.
With the Casio?
In exactly the same watch, in the same colour that I had.
Which I tell you what is actually quite interesting, knowing the in-depth person that you are, thorough person that you are with everything that you do, to have approached that like that. And I guess that's just...
I didn't, at this point in my life, I didn't realise that there were...
Garmin's or...
things to do this. And like, it's been a complete game changer now, having all of this data from other races to now being able to plan things. Like, I think it just shows how naive I was going into the race.
Yeah, wow.
And like, I hadn't eaten, like, and you're carrying all of your own food from, day one, your pack is like 7 kilos plus water.
Yes.
And I, foolishly thought, oh, well, I'm in the army, I'll be okay just having the same food every single day. I'm not going to bring a heater. I'm not going to bring a little stove.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to eat like cold, dehydrated food. So eating like crunchy rice I think it was some sort of curry thing that I had, rice and chicken, but it was horrendous. But I think going into it, like really suffering with that, making these mistakes, has made me the athlete that I am today. Had I gone in and everything been super easy and everything had gone so smoothly, I don't think I would be here now. But there were so many mistakes that I made, learnt from them.
Yeah.
That I guess it's like shaped me into the athlete that I am today. And that's then knowledge that I can then pass on to
other people,
myself
when I do it. So talk me through. So it's 5 days. So you're spending 4 nights in the desert.
No, it's 6 days.
Oh, 6 days, 5 nights.
5 nights. 5 nights in the desert of racing, but you go out, you spend like 2 nights before the first stage in the desert.
Fun. And who's in your tent? Is it whoever gets to the tent first? You fill out the first tent, and is that how it works?
So I had a charity place with Walking with the Wounded, military charity that provides support for ex-military personnel, whether they've just transitioning into civilian life or they've been injured. And it's a charity that I'm still an ambassador for, which is it's an amazing cause, and they do a lot of good work. And it was sharing a tent with 8 guys and girls from Walking with the Wounded. And like, they were excited to hear how I had got on from like the front of the pack, but realizing that at the same time that everyone going through it's got their own stories, and being able to put, no matter how bad you think things are and how much you're struggling at the time, there is someone in that race who is finding it either as hard or harder than you are.
Yeah.
And I think, the ability to be able to be like, actually, even if I'm struggling, it's all right. Okay,
so as you said, that was the MDS is an uncrewed event, but a lot of the running that you now do is crewed. So if you can give us a bit of an insight in how you pick your crew, what goes into that process for you, and a bit on that, if that's all right.
I think crewing and racing with a crew it's almost like a different sport. Like, yes, ultra running inherently is an individual event, but you need that team around you to be able to get you to the finish line as quickly as possible, because that's what racing is. Whether you're racing at the front trying to break course records, or you're racing at the back trying to beat cutoffs,
yes,
you're trying to get there as quickly as your body will allow you. So for me, a crew is such an integral part of the race, and it's really important to pick the right people, and for that crew to be able to make decisions for me on the go. So I think there has to be like 100% trust with that. And sometimes the person who you might have as crew might not be the best person. And if you've got other people there, they're then able to make that decision of, okay, let's change it. Actually, Tom doesn't need a hug. Tom needs to be pushed out and be like, right, come on, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Let's go. Or he might need that shoulder to cry on for a minute. Yes. And I think it's that real, like, at some points you've got to take emotions out of it, and other points you need to be there for the emotional support. Crewing is way harder than racing.
It is pretty tough, yeah. Seeing what you're going through, understanding what you need, and making sure that you deliver that sort of thing. I think that's pretty tough.
Yeah, and there's so much pressure. Like, at least like when I'm running, and you've had two completely polar opposite different experiences of crewing. One at Western States, where it was easy because everything went really well. Yeah. And then one at UTMB that wasn't easy and everything didn't go really well. Yeah. And we then spent a day in a lovely Italian hospital.
Yeah. Like you said, I think the two are complete polar opposites. Western States was it went so well that there wasn't a huge worry. I mean, you've always got the worry behind you of, are we going to get there in time? We've got to make sure that Tom is he gets everything he needs to be able to continue. But like you said, I think UTMB was a really stressful evening. I mean, it started off very exciting and whatever, because it's such an incredible race. But then then what happened. We had probably nearly an hour and a half not knowing where you were, and obviously being with Sophie as well, that was terrifying. We're sat there waiting in the van for you to come in, so there's a lot of waiting around, there's a lot of kind of uncertainty, because the live tracking, there's only so much information they can give you, and we're not going to be talking on the phone sort of thing. It's incredible to see like what happened at Western States, but then also the other side of it was it's incredibly emotional to have to go through seeing your best mate go through that, and as well as seeing Sophie be incredibly upset as well, and then like you said, spending however long in an Italian hospital, you're kind of all over the place. Emotions are running high, but thank goodness everything was okay and all sorted now. But it's a challenging but very exciting job to be done.
But I think from that experience, like, so many lessons learned. Like, as with most of the pros at UTMB, for example, and we'll do an episode later on talking about kit. Like, I bring a tiny phone that, yes, it passes, but it's pretty difficult to actually get in touch. Yeah. Because the battery's life on it's terrible. You don't get much signal because it's so small, and actually thinking, is it worth trying to save a little bit of weight for that? Yeah. No, it's not. So actually, like, something that I will take into it is, okay, well, actually, let's use my iPhone. Yeah. So I can speak to you guys. So if something does happen, at least everyone knows. But then also at the same time, like, for me, one of the things that I've learned and what I stress about when I'm running is what the time gaps are in front of me, which is pretty easy to give, because if I'm coming into a checkpoint afterwards, it's very easy to say, oh yeah, I saw Jim, or I saw Killian, or I saw Zach. They left here 3 minutes ago. Yeah. But actually what's also really important in a race is who's behind you. Yes. So the ability for 10 minutes after I go through a checkpoint to be able to get a call from the crew to say, yeah, this person is 4 minutes behind you. They took 2 minutes in Courmayeur and they look really good. They left running. Like, that information is so useful. So I think, like, even though it was a horrendous experience, I think it will set us up really nicely this year, having the same crew, but a really different protocol for it, because you can't get things 100% right the first time. And like, yeah, it was a miserable couple of days for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think it will make every iteration just that little bit better. Like I learned so much more from racing half of UTMB in 2023 than I did from having the best race of my life at Western States 8 weeks before.
Yeah.
And I think from like a cruise perspective as well, when things are going really well, it's really easy. Yeah. When your runner feels great, it's really easy because they know what to do. Whereas when the crew is then put in that stressful situation, it's really tough.
Well, that's it. You've got kind of like the night before both races, you sit down and you say, when I come into this aid station, this is what I need, etc., etc. It can be so easy and be to the book. And like you said before, you've got a couple of options. If I'm feeling miserable, I might want Brett to come in and make me laugh. If I'm needing a push on, I will probably want Sophie to come in and, you know, give me a slap and like push me on sort of thing. But you know what I mean? Like it's so easy for those for you to write out this is what it's going to be like, but then the actual reality is completely different. So you're kind of weighing up both options. Like, yes, he needs this, but actually when he comes in here and he's feeling completely different to what he said last night. It's just dealing with it and reacting and for you and me, it's very lucky, and obviously with Sophie as well, because we know you. So seeing you, we can tell what you might need, what you might not need, sort of thing.
For sure. Thanks to Plasmade for sponsoring the pod. Plasmade is a complementary plant-based adaptogen that has benefits across performance and recovery, as well as reducing travel stress. It's only to be taken pre and or post-race and training sessions, not during. Fundamentally, Plasmade, through its only active ingredient, French maritime pine bark extract, increases endogenous stabilized nitric oxide production, a vasodilator that increases oxygen uptake in the bloodstream and better circulation, as well as triggering powerful anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. By Plasmade preparing and optimizing the body, the efficiency of your in-race supplementation and hydration intake is increased. So, in summary, you perform better and recover faster. Allow me to introduce you to Plasmade by using the code ULTRA20, that is ULTRA20, at the checkout on the Plasmade websites to receive a 20% discount, and join me in using Plasmade.
So with your experience with MDS and also other races, can you give a bit comparison to the prep before that? I know you touched on it very briefly, but a bit of insight into that as well.
It's changed massively. And for every race, it, again, continues to change. And I think when you think that you've got like a blueprint for it, it's irrelevant, because it's not like running. If you're training for a road marathon, let's say you're training for one of the majors, kind of irrelevant which one it is. Like, you've got a marathon, courses are all pretty similar. Mm-hmm. There aren't that many like external factors. Yeah. Whereas if you're running racing an ultra, like, is it 50k? Is it 100k? Is it 100 miles? Is it relatively flat? Is it 100 miles with 3,000 meters of climbing, or is it 100 miles with 10,000 meters of climbing? Yeah. And the way that you approach those is completely different. So if I take Marathon des Sables, for example, I was so naive with it. I understood the construct of the race, but I didn't look at like the whole picture of it. I just thought, okay, well, I've just got to run a marathon every day. Yeah. When I get to the double marathon stage, I'll do that. And then it's just a marathon at the end. Like, you'll be fine. And it was so naive. And I was so like, again, exactly like I've said it then, just such a throwaway comment of being like, it'll be okay. Like, yeah. I'll just cuff it. I'll just get through it. I'll figure it out when I get along to it. And I think actually going into my first race, like, it was really useful for me to see that side of things, because now it's almost the polar opposite of it. Like, whereas, for Marathon Style, I started on the first day and worked my way to the finish. Whereas now what I would do is I would look at the finish and I would look at the race as a whole and then figure out, okay, in order to do this race, what do I need to do before this race? Like, what are the pieces of the puzzle that I've got to put together. So for Marathon des Sables, I think the only thing that I did with that was heat.
Yes.
I knew it was going to be really hot, so I knew that I needed to do some heat preparation, whatever that was. I don't know, for me, it was super unstructured. It was kind of just do a bit when you can. Nothing was measured. Nothing was anything.
Yeah.
Whereas I compare that now to racing Western States in 2023, like I had an incredible heat protocol set up from Olav with Santara Tech. I used core in order to measure my core body temperature.
Yeah.
It was so structured and it was so precise. I look at both of those, like, yes, I did heat training for both, but they were very different. Like, did it achieve the same effect? Like, yeah, it did to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I think with that, like, you just take the time that you have. Once you've identified what the risk is, you then come up with a way to counteract that risk.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, for the more experience I've got, the easier it is for me to identify different parts in different races and figure out what I need to do in order to be able to do that bit as well as I possibly can. And I think it is sometimes very analytical with looking at race profiles, how far there is between aid stations, and everything with that has come through experience and working with my whole array of different partners to make sure that I'm prepared for all of those stages. And if there is a part of the race that is a real challenge for me and I know it's going to be challenging, I will then work out, okay, well, I know this is going to be a challenge. What can I do now in this training block to make that challenge as easy for myself as possible? So I take running in the dark for example, and it's not fully in the dark because I'm using a headlamp. But running with a headlamp is a completely different sport than running in the daylight.
Yeah.
Because if you're running in the light, you can look around, you can see where the big rocks are 20 meters in front of you, but also 2 meters in front of you at the same time. With a headlamp, where you look is what you see.
Yeah.
So you don't know if you're looking 20 meters ahead, you're not seeing what's 2 meters in front of you. And if you're looking 2 meters in front of you, you're not seeing what's 20 meters ahead of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first time I ever ran with a headlamp was in the long stage at Marathon des Sables. I'd never worn a headlamp to run with. In the military, if we were doing night exercises, things at night, you weren't allowed to use a headlamp.
Yeah.
So I was like, this was completely alien to me. I'd done no prep for it. And I just thought at the time, I'll just figure it out on the day.
Yeah.
Whereas now, running with a torch, I have identified that it is an area where I can massively improve and get way more disciplined with my headlamp. Batteries for headlamps don't last forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you can't have it on full beam for the whole night time because you're going to run out of power, or you have to carry way more spare batteries. So you have to make a decision, like, what lamp do I go for? What battery do I use? What power settings do I have it on? And if you don't practice these things, you're never going to know on the race day. So now what I will do in training is I'll figure out exactly what I need to do. Okay, how long does this battery last? How many batteries am I going to need to carry? Because how long is it going to take me to get from point A to point B, and how long the night is? Like, what time's sunset? What time's sunrise?
Okay, so as an example, if you're putting, that's an elite side of things, into, say, an everyday runner who just wants to go and do the MDS, which there are a lot of people, like everyday runners that do that, or at UTMB who also do that as well. And they have families, they have jobs, they're unable to kind of, as you're an elite athlete, you can kind of go...
Are you looking for free tips?
A little bit of free tip, but a bit of an understanding, like if you were going to put, like, can you break down what you're saying as an elite athlete into someone who doesn't have the time that you have? So if you were going to give, say, 3 key takeaways for someone who was going to complete an ultra like UTMB, what would they be? What would they be?
I think firstly it's to look at the race as a whole.
Yeah.
And see what areas they think they're going to be strong on and what areas they're going to be weak on.
Yeah.
Once you've done that, that would be point number 1. Once you've done that, point number 2, you can then come up with a plan to make sure that you are fully prepared for all of those different areas. So if you know if the race is super technical, and you're not very good at running on technical terrain, that's something that you need to practice and improve, because you want to make life as easy as yourself for number 3.
Yes.
So for the race, which then takes us on to number 3, that is the race itself. And it's now, okay, well, you've identified what the issues were, you've worked on those issues, and now number 3, it's just having that confidence that you have done everything that you can in the parameters of your life to make sure that you're ready.
Yeah.
And if you haven't done the work, like, that's okay, but at least you know where the problems are going to be. And actually, like, we don't, as runners, it's not just you do a race and that's you finished.
Yeah.
It then rolls on to the next race and the next one and the next one. So never see a race as like an individual race.
It's a stepping stone.
It's a stepping stone, and it's part of the wider plan.
So none of those 3 points is turn the lights off in the gym and run on the treadmill in the dark.
No, I would not. I would not recommend that at all. Maybe for my competitors, I'd recommend that. But no, for anyone who I think wants to do well, that's probably not the best idea.
Cool. So we've actually now got some questions from some of your followers, and the first one being, what is the best thing about ultra running?
For me, I think ultra running is just that ability to push yourself as hard as you want, both mentally and physically, seeing what you're capable of achieving in such a different way of life than your normal job.
Yeah. Cool. How have you planned your season?
This year, for me, everything is revolving around UTMB, Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc. That's at the end of August, and I'll do a 100-mile race there. They say it's 100 miles, but it's not. It's like 106.
Yeah.
And those extra 6 at the end are always pretty challenging.
Yeah, I bet.
So I have raced Transvolcania in La Palma, and I'm about to go and race the European Mountain Running Championships in Annecy. Then
what distance is that?
That's 56 kilometers, fast race, non-technical trail.
Okay.
And then I will then do a couple of weeks after that, go to Zugspitze and stay in Leutasch to the Austria-Germany border, and race an 85k race there at night to get some good practice with my headlamp.
Yeah.
And then I'll then just go into a big training block at altitude, building up to UTMB.
So what do you remember the most about your first race?
I think the biggest lesson that I've learned, I'm not actually going to take from... my biggest memory, probably not from my first race. It was at CCC in 2018. And coming into the halfway point at 50k, I think I was in 4th place and just feeling absolutely horrendous. But it was in the aid station where I was told that actually the people in front didn't look good and they weren't having good days either. And it was just that memory of basically just asking myself, like, how much do you want this? How hard are you prepared to push? How much are you prepared to suffer for 50k with a chance of being on the podium and just not giving up? And I think it was that I have a really, really strong memory of just something in my mind just changing, going from, I guess, feeling slightly sorry for myself to feeling really strong and motivated to keep going. And that came from my crew.
Yeah.
And I remember that is how important the crew is, that then ultimately led to my first major win on the trails.
And finally, the last question that we have is, what would you say is the biggest learn you've had from any of your ultra runs?
I think probably actually I think when races go well, you can learn a little bit, but I think it's when races don't go to plan that you learn the most. So yeah, I think for me, UTMB 2023, the biggest lesson that I learned about the race itself was that you've got to respect the race.
Yeah.
You've got to put the work in, and you've got to do things your way rather than trying to run someone else's race.
Yes.
And like, I like to think that I'm very good at running my own race, but at UTMB in 2023, I got carried away. I didn't run my own race. And I think that's ultimately what led to my DNF.
Yeah.
But it's happened. I've learned from it. And yeah, really looking forward to building on it for this year, 2024.
As you said, another stepping stone to this year.
Yeah, exactly. And beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Thank you very much for that, listeners. And we'll have some more next week.
So that is it for episode 1. Thank you very much all for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you hear about the latest episodes. Tell all your friends, and yeah, slide into my DMs, ask some questions, and we'll answer those questions next week on the podcast. But until then, stay safe, stay happy, and see you on the trails.
See you out there. Thanks a lot.